Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world where ice bites at your ankles, fire smokes in your lungs, and strange figures flicker at the edge of your sight. You stand in a valley where snow is eternal, your breath rising in thick clouds, and the horizon is all jagged teeth of stone. The year is unguessable, and the stars above are the same ones you see now. Yet the land is nothing like the one you know. Woolly mammoths shuffle past like shaggy, living boulders, and saber-toothed cats carve shadows into the tundra. This is not the zoo version of the Ice Age, this is the raw, unpadded version. And you probably wouldn't last a single night without getting frostbitten toes or accidentally becoming a wolf snack. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening while tucked in bed, drop a quick comment with your location and your local time. It's always wild to me to think of someone in California yawning at the same story while someone in Norway listens with the sun already rising. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the scree of a Siberian slope, ice crunching beneath cracked leather sandals. The wind slices your face like flint. This is the Altai Mountains, where caves open like black mouths against the limestone cliffs. Inside one of those mouths, the Denisova cave, something waits that doesn't look entirely unlike you. Tonight, you're not walking towards safety, but toward the first glimpse of another kind of human. Picture the scene. You're a modern Homo sapiens, freshly migrated from the warmer grasslands farther south. Your group has followed herds northward, maybe chasing mammoths, maybe just chasing the idea of freedom. And suddenly the landscape feels full of eyes. At the cave entrance, flickering shadows dance across rock. The smell of wood smoke reaches you. You thought your group was alone out here. Wrong. You lean closer, heart thudding, and there they are, stocky figures with wide rib cages, broader than yours, shorter but powerful. Their hands are calloused, their jaws square, their eyes gleaming in firelight. These are not animals. These are not strangers in the way wolves are strangers. They are human, but not your human. Later, scientists will call them Denisovans. Tonight, you just call them neighbors you're not sure you wanted. Mainstream fact. Denisovans were discovered only recently, in 2010, from a finger bone and a couple of teeth in this very cave. Before that, no one even knew they existed. So when you step across this imaginary threshold, remember, the story of their existence is barely more than a decade old in our time, but their impact is thousands of generations deep in yours. And here's a quirky tidbit to rattle in your skull. The Denisovan molars found in the cave are enormous, the kind of chompers that make you imagine them biting through frozen mammoth meat like it's a marshmallow. You glance at their faces and maybe notice their smiles are just a little more toothy than yours. Makes you wonder who's really the predator here. You crouch, half hidden in the scrub, debating whether to step forward or bolt. Historians still argue whether first contacts between groups like yours were violent, cautious, or even downright boring. Did you greet them with spears drawn? Or did you sheepishly wave and hope they invited you to sit by the fire? Your gut tonight says, probably both. You ease into the cave's edge, the flickering glow lighting the walls. Animal fat lamps burn, and shadows stretch into animal shapes. A child stares back at you. Not much different from your own siblings. His hair is tangled, his cheeks flushed with the cave's warmth. Behind him, a figure rises, a woman, her shoulders squared, her chest broad, her breath steady in the thin air of this mountain world. She looks at you the way you might look at a tourist wandering into your kitchen. Curious, annoyed, but not exactly murderous. Not yet. The silence is broken by the hiss of firewood collapsing. Sparks drift upward, catching on the smoke-black ceiling. You realize this place isn't just a temporary shelter. It's a home. The walls are carved with scratches, maybe marks of hunts or just idle doodles. A pile of stone flakes gleams in the dim light, sharper than any your group carries. You feel suddenly clumsy, suddenly young. Your companions shuffle behind you, murmuring nervously. You think about leaving, but something holds you still. Maybe it's the fire. Maybe it's the idea that for the first time in your short, frost-bitten life, you're seeing proof you're not alone. Other people exist. Other ways of being human exist. That realization burns brighter than the fire. The Denisovan woman tilts her head, then gestures vaguely half warning, half invitation. You hesitate. Step forward. A trickle of icy water drips from the cave roof onto your wrist, reminding you how far from home you are. This is the threshold, the liminal space between your kind of human and theirs. Once you cross it, nothing will be the same. A quick aside, you know how every movie makes first contact, either terrifying or heartwarming. Reality is probably much messier. Imagine stumbling into a stranger's house in the middle of the night because you smelled stew. That's closer to the truth. You're hungry, cold, and desperate, and so are they. The real miracle is that neither side bolts or throws rocks immediately. Inside, the air smells of damp fur and roasted marrow. A wolf pelt hangs from the wall like a crude curtain. You notice their tools, stone points hafted onto wooden shafts with pitch and sinew. They've mastered the same tricks as you, maybe even more efficiently. Their world overlaps with yours. But it's also older, heavier, rooted in mountains you barely understand. You sit cautiously near the fire's edge. Heat creeps into your bones, stinging your frozen fingers back to life. The Denisovan child giggles at the sight of you, probably because your hair is plastered with ice and your nose is red. You can't help but grin back. In that moment, the boundary between species feels thinner than the smoke between you. Outside, the wind howls like a hungry beast. Inside, you sense the beginning of something fragile and impossible. Coexistence, you don't know whether it will last. You don't know whether this family will one day braid into your bloodline or vanish into the dark corners of memory. For now, all you know is that you are not the only humans in this frozen world. And with that thought, you lean into the firelight, letting it wash over your eyelids. Tomorrow, the valley will still be cold, the mammoths will still roam, and your kind will still wonder what it means to share the earth. Tonight, though, you have seen a face not yours, but not entirely different, and you feel history shifting beneath your cracked sandals. You sit closer to the fire now, knees drawn up, the warmth making your frozen joints ache as blood creeps back into them. The Denisovan woman still watches you, with a gaze that feels more like weather than like judgment. Steady, immovable, impossible to argue with. Her eyes flicker from your face to the small knife you carry at your hip, as if she's measuring both your worth and your threat. The crackling flames are the only translator you have. It is awkward. This first brush of strangers, you imagine what you must look like to them. Tall, weary, maybe a bit underfed, with features sharp from weeks of cold and hunger. You probably smell terrible. Your last bath was a melted snow puddle, and your skin is crusted with soot from your own pitiful fire. And here they sit, broad-chested, with cheeks ruddy from the cave's heat and bodies adapted to this thin-aired mountain world. Their lungs pull in oxygen you can barely hold. You're panting just from standing near the cave entrance, while they breathe as if the air were thick with sea-level ease. That's no exaggeration. Mainstream fact. Denisovan DNA in modern Tibetans and Sherpa contains a gene variant IPAS1 that helps them thrive at high altitudes, where oxygen is scarce. Without it, you'd feel like you were choking just climbing a hill. With it, they stride up cliffs like goats. Imagine trying to out-hike someone whose blood cells are basically turbocharged oxygen tanks. Spoiler, you'd lose. The fire pops. One of the men shorter than you, shoulders like a bear, leans forward and tosses another log into the pit. Sparks fly, lighting up the cave's blackened ceiling. You flinch, instinctively clutching your knife. He notices, he chuckles. Not mockery, but recognition. He's been the nervous stranger before. Maybe once, long ago. His people stumbled into yet another branch of human they didn't know existed. You're just the latest in a long series of awkward guests. A child toddles toward you, curious. His hands are sticky with fat from gnawing on a roasted bone. And he offers it to you the way kids do, casually, as if sharing food is just another part of breathing. You hesitate, then take it. The marrow is warm, buttery, almost sweet, and it slides down your throat like a blessing. You close your eyes. For a moment, the cold, the danger, the strangeness, it all fades under the comfort of calories. You open your eyes to find the woman smirking. She knows exactly what that bite of marrow meant to you. Hospitality is rarely free. You've stepped deeper into a web of obligations. Quirky tidbit for your tired brain. Some scientists suggest that Neanderthals and Denisovans may have had bigger lungs and barrel-shaped chests, not just because of altitude, but because their rib cages housed huge livers. Why? Possibly to help process high-fat diets of Ice Age meat. Imagine being so adapted that your liver is basically a steak blender. You glance around at these broad-chested hosts and think, yep, that tracks. You try speaking. Words tumbling clumsy from your mouth. They don't understand. Their language is guttural. Deeper, a rumble like stone grinding against stone. You repeat a gesture, pointing to the fire, to yourself, then to them. Slowly, the bare-shouldered man nods. A small step, but a step nonetheless. Outside, the wind claws at the cave mouth, carrying snow in sharp little needles. You're glad for the fire now, even if it belongs to strangers. You think about your own camp, your companions shivering under thin hides. Part of you feels guilty for the warmth soaking into your skin, like you've stolen it. Another part feels like you're glimpsing a future one where survival isn't just about fighting nature, but about sharing it. Historians still argue whether these early meetings were cooperative or hostile. Did groups trade goods, mates, and knowledge? Or did they mostly glare at each other across rivers until someone gave up and left? Archaeology can only hint. Scattered bones and tools don't record the tone of conversations. That's left to your imagination. Tonight, you imagine a tense peace suspicion, thick as smoke, but not yet breaking into violence. The woman gestures again, sharper this time, pointing toward your knife. You hesitate, then slide it from your belt and place it on the ground between you. It's a flake of flint hafted with sinew to a wooden handle. Not your best work. Honestly, she picks it up, studies the edge, then mutters something to the others. The bare-shouldered man hands her one of theirs in exchange. You lift it, surprised by its weight and polish. The edge glitters. Sharper than yours? You whistle softly without meaning to. They grin. Trade. It begins with tools, but you sense it could stretch farther ideas. Stories. Maybe even people. You wonder if this is how cultures braid together, not with speeches or treaties, but with awkward handoffs over smoky fires. The child leans into your lap, eyelids drooping. He smells like ash and wet fur. You glance at the woman, nervous, but she shrugs. Apparently, you've been adopted for the night as a pillow. You stroke the child's tangled hair, wondering what his life will look like. Whether your people and his will cross paths again, or whether, one day, someone digging through this very cave will hold a fragment of his tooth and wonder who he was. And here's a joke your half-frozen brain can't resist. If this were a sitcom, the laugh track would kick in now. Strangers meet, share a bone, babysit a kid, and boom, instant prehistoric roommate comedy. Too bad no one's filming. As the fire dims, you start to notice details in the cave walls. Scratches that aren't random. Some look like tally marks, maybe a count of hunts or seasons. Others swirl like crude spirals. Art. A bored child's doodles. You can't tell, but it sends a shiver down your spine. You thought your people invented imagination. Apparently not. The woman finally breaks the silence with a sound low, almost like humming. The others join, voices weaving into a rhythm. It isn't a song, you know, but it has cadence. Repetition, a chant, a lullaby. You close your eyes, letting it wash over you. The child in your lap snores. For the first time in weeks, you feel the kind of calm that doesn't come from full bellies or secure shelters, but from the realization that your species is not the only one that knows how to make beauty in the dark. When you wake later, the fire's embers glow faintly red. The child is gone, tucked back with his family. Your knife lies beside you, edge dulled from their examination. In its place rests the Denisovan blade they gave you, a gift, or a loan. You're not sure. You roll it in your hand, feeling the balance, the sharpness. It cuts deeper than flint. It cuts into your certainty that your people are unique. You step outside into the cold night, the stars burning hard and clear. Behind you, the cave breathes smoke and warmth. Ahead, the tundra stretches silent. You pull the borrowed blade tight against your chest, already imagining how it will feel to show your companions. They'll ask where it came from. You'll tell them. And in that telling, the story of us and them begins to blur. You don't walk away from that cave empty-handed. The Denisovan blade feels like treasure against your palm, its edge catching starlight as you rejoin your group at the base of the ridge. Your companions crowd around, whispering in awe. Passing it hand to hand, you can hear the quiet envy in their breaths. Some mutter about spirits, others about theft, but mostly they marvel at the craft. One of the older hunters shakes his head, muttering that tools like this shouldn't belong to strangers. You know what he means? Technology is power, and power isn't usually shared. Yet here you are, carrying a symbol of a tentative trust, a shard of stone that speaks louder than words. The next days are cautious. You lead your group back to the cave more than once, approaching slowly, making sure your arrival is expected. The Denisovans don't chase you away. Instead, they stand at the mouth of the cave with arms folded, waiting to see what you bring. It feels like a market, though no stalls or traders exist. Just rocks, hides, bones, and curiosity. Mainstream fact. Archaeological digs at Denisova Cave revealed not just stone tools, but ornaments bracelets carved from polished green chlorite, with holes drilled so precisely that modern scientists had to use lasers to replicate the method. Imagine that a people dismissed for so long as archaic might have had finer jewelry than anything you're wearing tonight. You shuffle nervously as your group lays out their meager offerings. A bundle of ochre pigments, scraped from the riverbank, a handful of seashells from your southern journeys, and a knife less polished than theirs, but useful enough. The Denisovans examine each item carefully, grunting to one another. One woman fingers the ochre, smearing it across her thumb until it glows red. She smirks, then drags the pigment across a boy's cheek in a crude stripe. He beams. A laugh rises from the group. Quirky tidbit. There's evidence that some Denisovan artifacts bear tiny drill marks so smooth. Some researchers jokingly suggested they might have invented something like a hand drill before anyone else. Picture them crouched in their caves, twirling sticks faster than you can blink, drilling holes like Ice Age dentists. It sounds absurd, but then again, so does half of prehistory. The trading becomes something more than exchange. It becomes a performance. You offer seashells strung on sinew. They counter with bone needles polished to fine points. You present a pelt. They hand you a carved flake so sharp it could shave hair. Slowly, a rhythm builds. A back and forth where value isn't fixed, but felt. You don't have words for barter yet, but you feel its pull. Historians still argue whether these trades were intentional networks or just chance meetings. Were humans and Denisovans building alliances? Or were you all just scavengers of convenience? Tonight, in the flicker of firelight, it feels like both the seashells you hand them are worthless here in the mountains, but priceless in novelty. The bone needles they give you are common to them, miraculous to you. Value is relative. One evening, while the fire roars higher than usual, one of your companions does something foolish. He tries to mimic the Denisovan tool making, hammering flint with an awkward rhythm. The cave bursts with laughter, not cruel, but genuine. They slap their thighs, shake their heads, and finally, one of the stocky men takes the flint, showing you the proper angle, the right pressure. Sparks fly. A perfect blade emerges. He hands it to you with a grin. In that moment, you realize you've been handed more than stone, you've been given knowledge. And knowledge is heavier than any gift. You spend hours watching their hands. The quick, precise strikes, the careful choice of cores, the rhythm that seems almost musical. You try, fail, try again. Soon, a child sits beside you, copying both of you, his small hands clumsy but determined. You glance at him, wondering what kind of tools he'll pass down one day if he has the chance. And because it's bedtime history, here's your second joke of the night. If prehistoric trading had Yelp reviews, your group would have left. 4 stars. Friendly hosts. Marrow stew was cold. Blade edges spectacular. The Denisovans, meanwhile, would have given you 2 stars for showing up late and eating too much. The ochre, though that's what binds you. One of your companions smears it across his face in broad lines, mimicking the Denisovan stripe. They laugh again, then mark their own faces. And soon everyone looks like warriors painted for battle. Though the only fight tonight is with drowsiness, for the first time, you're not just separate groups of humans. You're a crowd of red-cheeked figures glowing in the firelight. indistinguishable in the blur of pigment and smoke. As days pass, you notice small changes in your group. Someone begins carving a bead from bone, inspired by their ornaments. Another ties shells into his hair. The children mimic the Denisovan chant you heard before, stumbling over its rhythm but smiling. Culture bleeds across the invisible line between you, dripping like melted snow into the soil. Impossible to separate again. But it isn't without tension. One night, when food runs short, a younger hunter mutters that the Denisovans eat too much, that their broad chests and powerful lungs mean they're stealing more than their share of game. You hush him quickly, but the thought sticks in your mind. Hospitality has limits. Cooperation lasts only as long as bellies are full. Later, sitting outside under the stars, you clutch one of their bone needles in your hand. It's so small, so delicate, and yet it carries a kind of permanence. The beadwork they string together, the pigments they smear across stone, the chants they hum. These aren't survival tricks. These are signs of imagination. And imagination is dangerous because it means they dream. Just like you. You wonder what they dream about. Do they imagine strange lands beyond the mountains? Do they tell stories about thunder spirits? Or about heroes who climbed the cliffs and never came back? You'll never know for certain. All you can do is sit in the fire's glow, listening to the hum of voices you don't understand, and feel the weight of history press against your bones. The night grows late, the fire burns low, and you realize something startling. You no longer feel like a guest. You feel like part of the circle. The line between us and them has blurred under layers of soot and ochre. And yet, deep down, you sense a fragility to it all. The snow outside grows heavier. The hunts grow leaner. Cooperation might hold for a season, maybe two, but hunger always waits at the edge of every alliance. Still, for now, the trade continues. Stories pass between gestures, tools and trinkets change hands. You and the Denisovans sit by the same fire, breathing the same smoke, sharing the same marrow from the same bones. For the first time in human history, trade isn't just about objects, it's about connection. And that, you realize, is worth more than any polished blade. The marrow-smeared fires and the trading of shiny trinkets are one thing. But the real turning point, the moment when strangers become something far more complicated, creeps in quietly. The way embers smolder long after the logs have burned down, it begins with a glance, a laugh, a touch of hands over shared stone flakes. And suddenly the gulf between your kind and theirs doesn't seem as wide as it did under that first moonlit encounter. You notice it one night when your group lingers longer than usual in the cave. The Denisovan woman with the squared shoulders moves closer to one of your hunters. They sit together, faces painted in matching ochre streaks, knees brushing whenever they shift. At first, you think it's just the closeness of the fire, but the way she laughs at his clumsy gestures, the way he grins back like a boy with honey in his mouth, it feels different. Historians still argue whether interbreeding between groups was rare accident or regular strategy. Was it love, lust, or simply survival insurance? The truth is probably all three. You imagine the logic, mixed bloodlines, and your children inherit a broader range of skills, traits, and genetic tricks in an ice age where every advantage matters. Why not? Yet sitting in that cave, watching two humans from different branches of the tree brush hands, you realize it's not about logic. It's about the oldest human impulse of all, connection. The fire crackles, throwing sparks against the ceiling. The rest of the group pretends not to notice, but everyone sees. You feel the weight of it. Something irreversible is happening here. Mainstream fact. Today, traces of Denisovan DNA live on in modern humans, especially among populations in Southeast Asia, Papua New Guinea, and the Himalayas. That means people walking around right now carry genes shaped by moments exactly like this one. Moments when strangers became partners, when differences blurred in the dark. Quirky tidbit, some Denisovan genes may even influence things like your skin, your immune system, even the way you adapt to sunlight. Imagine that your tendency to sunburn in summer or shrug off a virus could be a gift from someone who shared marrow stew by a smoky fire 40,000 years ago. The ghosts of their love stories live in your bloodwork. But let's not romanticize too much. Pairings in the Ice Age weren't candlelit dinners and polite conversations. They were messy, improvised, tangled up in survival. You might laugh now. But imagine trying to flirt while your breath is visible in the freezing air and your hair is matted with mammoth grease. Nice bone needle you've got there. Probably passed as a solid pickup line. One night, as your people and theirs sit close, you hear the soft sound of an infant crying deeper in the cave. The Denisovan child's wails echo off the stone, cutting through the murmurs of adults. Instantly, the mother scoops him up, her broad chest steadying his sobs. The sound tugs at something inside you. Babies are universal translators. Their cries remind you that beyond spears and pigments, what you all really fight for is continuity, life going forward. And here's the thing. You sense that continuity is already happening. The blurred lines between groups don't just create alliances, they create families. The child on that woman's hip may someday carry not just her stocky frame, but also some spark from your kind. You realize with a shiver that extinction is not always a vanishing. Sometimes it's a blending, a folding into another story. Historians still argue whether such unions were peaceful or forced. The truth is lost to the snow, but you prefer to imagine tenderness, the quiet moments when one human reached for another because the night was long and the fire was warm, and the alternative was loneliness. You glance at your own companions. Some whisper about the dangers of mixing, fearing the unknown. Others watch with curiosity, as if wondering whether they'll try it themselves. You feel torn, caught between suspicion and understanding. But then you think of the child, giggling earlier as he smeared ochre on your face. In that laughter, you saw no division, only the simple joy of being alive. And here's your joke for the night. Tucked between the solemn bits, imagine a prehistoric version of Meet the Parents. You bring your Denisovan sweetheart back to your camp, and your mother gasps. He's got how many ribs? Family dinners must have been awkward. The seasons turn, and the mingling deepens. You notice the Denisovan woman visiting your camp, sitting with your hunter as he sharpens blades. He learns her words. Haltingly, she learns his. Their gestures become fluid. Their conversations peppered with shared laughter. Soon, she spends nights wrapped in furs beside him. One morning, you see them walking together, her hand brushing his shoulder, his fingers laced with hers. Behind them, the horizon blazes pink with dawn. You wonder what the world will call their children, half this, half that, or something entirely new. Mainstream fact. Studies show that between 1% and 5% of the DNA in some modern human populations can be traced back to Denisovans. That doesn't happen by chance. It happens because for countless nights, humans like you chose to step across the line between us and them. As months pass, you begin to notice echoes of their ways in your own people. A child from your camp hums one of their chants. A hunter sharpens his blade using their rhythm. A woman weaves shells into her hair. Copying the Denisovan style, culture has become contagious, spreading faster than fire along dry grass. But love isn't only tender, it's also risky. When two groups knit together, tensions flare, jealousies stir. Your people mutter about loyalties. What happens when food is scarce and choices must be made? Do you protect your blood kin or the new kin braided through love? These questions hang in the cold air like frost. Yet, when you watch your hunter cradle the child born from that unlikely union, you realize questions don't matter as much as reality. The baby's cry is both familiar and strange, carrying the pitch of two worlds. You lean in, tracing the curve of his small hand, wondering what history he will carry forward. The fire burns lower, shadows lengthen, and you feel the tug of inevitability. Strangers have become family. Rivals have become lovers. What began as suspicion has blurred into tenderness, then into lineage. You realize the world is never as simple as separate tribes glaring across icy rivers. It's a world of mingled smoke, shared marrow, and children who belong to both and neither. And as you drift towards sleep, one last thought clings to you. Maybe survival isn't about purity or division. Maybe it's about mixing, about folding one story into another until thousands of years later, people like you lie in bed, listening to whispered tales about forgotten lovers who once sat by smoky fires in caves. You wake to the hush of snow sliding off the cave roof, a muffled sigh in the dark. Around you, bodies shift in furs, breaths mingling in the smoky air. Some belong to your group, others to the Denisovans. But in the half-light of dawn, it's impossible to tell where one family ends and the other begins. The mingling of humans has begun, yet with it comes something new, the birth of stories. By now, evenings in the cave rarely pass in silence. Words that don't translate get filled in with pantomime, with tone, with laughter. Slowly, you start to understand the rhythm of their speech, not the vocabulary, but the flow. And within that rhythm lies something more than trade or instructions for napping stone. It's myth, the kind of tale that turns survival into meaning. Mainstream fact. Every human group ever studied has myths. Stories explaining thunder, death, stars, and why the world is the way it is. You can imagine the Denisovans were no different. They sat by firelight, eyes gleaming, and spun tales that made the universe less terrifying. The difference is, their myths are gone, vanished with their language. Only the echo of their DNA remains. A faint whisper in your blood. One night, the Denisovan elder raises his hand, silencing chatter. His voice rumbles deep. Words foreign but gestures familiar. He points to the mountains outside, sharp against the dusk, then beats his chest. The children lean forward, eyes wide. You follow his motions. Giants in the cliffs, spirits that ride storms, beasts that stalk valleys. The Denisovans laugh at your startled expression. But their laughter is affectionate, like parents watching a child's wonder. Quirky tidbit. In some caves across Eurasia, researchers have found stalagmites deliberately arranged into circle structures built over 170. 0 years ago, not by your species, but by Neanderthals, Denisovans' close cousins. Some say they were shrines, others say playgrounds, and some mutter maybe just bored cave kids stacking rocks. Historians still argue whether such constructions were sacred, practical, or simply silly. Sitting here now, you can picture your Denisovan hosts arranging their own stones, telling tales to explain why the world behaves as it does. As the elder speaks, you think about your own group's stories, of spirits in rivers, of animals reborn in stars. You realize both groups have tried to weave sense out of chaos. It hits you that myth is not just entertainment, it's survival. If you can explain thunder, you can control fear. If you can name the beasts in the dark, you can trick yourself into believing you'll outlive them. The Denisovan woman beside you mimics a thunderclap, slapping her hands. The children squeal. One of your hunters joins in, mimicking a mammoth trumpeting, and the room dissolves into laughter. Soon, the story is a chorus half nonsense, half poetry. And here's your first joke of the night. Imagine the first cross-species game of charades. Thunder spirit with big teeth. Lives in the cliff. Sounds like roar. If the Ice Age had game shows, you'd have crushed it. But myths are not all light. Some nights, the stories turn darker. You notice the Denisovans gesturing towards shadows at the cave's edge, muttering low. You don't understand the words, but you feel the fear. Spirits that take children, perhaps, or monsters lurking in the forest. You shiver, realizing that while humans have always laughed together, we've also always been afraid together. Historians still argue whether myth-making was unique to Homo sapiens or shared among all human branches. Did imagination bloom only in your lineage? Or did it sprout wherever fire met night? The evidence suggests the latter. As the chants echo, you feel certain that Denisovans had their own myths strange, half-remembered explanations for life's brutal mysteries. One evening, the elder smears ochre on the cave wall, tracing crude lines that form into the shape of a stag. The children gasp. You blink. This isn't trade anymore, this is art. And art, in its own way, is myth preserved in pigment. You find yourself lifting your own lump of ochre, adding a line beside his. The elder glances at you, then nods, as though to say, yes, now it is our story too. Soon, the walls bloom with colour-red stags, black mammoths, spirals, handprints pressed in dripping pigment. It's messy, uneven, but unmistakable. History is bleeding into stone. Your people, their people, all pressed together into marks that will outlast both. Quirky detail again. In 2018, scientists dated red hand stencils in Spanish caves to over 64. We're 0 years ago older than Homo sapiens in that region, which means Neanderthals, and maybe Denisovans, were the artists. Their hands literally stamped time before your kind arrived. You step back, staring at the growing mural, and wonder whether one day someone will find these marks. Will they know it was you? Or will they argue in books about whether archaic humans were even capable of art? You chuckle bitterly. Historians of the future will debate everything, but they won't know the warmth of this fire or the laughter echoing in your chest tonight. The children hum again, a lullaby half song, half story. Your eyelids droop, soothed by the rhythm. But behind the comfort lurks a question. What if myths are more than stories? What if they are warnings? When the elder gestures to the mountains, does he tell of spirits or of neighbors? Rivals, threats you haven't met yet. Myth blurs truth and imagination. You realize it always has. And here's your second joke of the night, whispered to keep you from sinking too deep. If the Denisovans had bedtime stories, they probably went, if you don't stay under the furs, the humans from the south will nibble your toes. You laugh quietly. Maybe you are someone else's bogeyman. As the fire burns low, you trace your own hand against the wall. The pigment seeps into cracks, leaving behind your mark beside theirs. Tomorrow, the snow will fall again. Hunts will be lean, alliances tested, but tonight, your story joins theirs in ochre. You lean back, listening to the myths swirling in the smoky cave, and realize something startling. The Denisovans no longer feel like strangers. They feel like characters in your own stories, heroes, rivals, tricksters. Teachers, myths, have a way of blurring categories until all that matters is the telling. And in that blur, as sleep tugs at your eyes, you sense the shape of the future, a world not of separate tales, but of woven ones, where your descendants will carry myths not of us or them, but of both, braided together like smoke rising from the same fire. Snowdrifts press high against the cave mouth, but the Denisovans move through them like they're walking across soft grass. You watch, chest heaving, as one of them carries an entire haunch of meat up the slope without pausing, his breath steady as though the air is thick and kind. You, meanwhile, gasp like a fish tossed onto the ice, your legs trembling, lungs burning. Every step in this thin mountain air feels like dragging a boulder. They notice your struggle. A woman smirks, adjusts her load of firewood, and passes you with the ease of a wolf trotting on its own trail. Mainstream fact. Denisovans carried genetic adaptations for high-altitude living, particularly the EPAS1 gene. Today, this same gene helps Tibetans and Sherpas thrive in places like the Himalayas, where most of us would collapse after half an hour. You're standing at the birthplace of that adaptation, feeling the ache of your weaker blood as your companions collapse on their knees, while the Denisovans whistle tunelessly and keep climbing. It's humbling. This realization, you thought yourself strong, a hunter who crossed half a continent. And yet, in these high passes, you're fragile, a visitor who doesn't belong. You lean against a rock, trying not to show your dizziness, and catch the eye of a Denisovan child who tilts his head as if to say, "Why are you so slow?" Quirky tidbit. There's a theory that Denisovans didn't just survive in mountains. They flourished there. Some researchers even suggest their lungs and hearts might have been proportionally larger, making them natural-born mountaineers. Imagine if every one of them could outhike the best modern athlete while carrying half a mammoth on their back. It makes you chuckle bitterly, though it comes out more like a wheeze. The trail narrows, hugging the side of a cliff. Your hands scrape cold rock as you shuffle forward, praying the snow underfoot doesn't give way. The Denisovans walk as if the path is wide as a meadow, their boots crunching in steady rhythm. You try to copy their gait. They're calm, but your fear makes your steps clumsy. One misstep and you'd tumble into the gorge below. Historians still argue whether modern humans ever fully adapted to these high ranges before borrowing Denisovan genes through interbreeding. Were we simply visitors, clumsy and short-lived in these heights? Or did we cling long enough to learn the land? Tonight, in your lungs, the answer feels clear. You wouldn't last long without their help. At the ridge's peak, you stagger into a plateau. Wind shrieks across open snowfields, carrying flakes like shards of glass. The Denisovans gather wood, building a fire shielded by stones. You collapse beside it. Grateful? They hardly seem winded. Their chests rise and fall with a steady rhythm, like bellows in a forge. You realize that to them, this altitude is home. To you, it's a slow suffocation. And here's your first joke to lighten the wheeze. If prehistoric hiking had Yelp reviews, yours would read, 2 stars, beautiful views, 0 oxygen. Would not recommend, unless you're half Denisovan. As the fire warms your fingers, you look around. The plateau stretches white and endless, but small details emerge. The faint track of ibex winding into cliffs, a scattering of shrubs huddled against stone, a frozen stream shimmering under ice. You realize this isn't barren. It's alive, if you know how to read it. And they do. The Denisovan woman gestures toward the horizon, pointing at a distant ridge. Her voice is low, almost casual, but carries authority. The men nod, adjusting spears. You don't understand the words, but the intent is clear. There's game ahead. You pull yourself upright, willing your legs to obey. The hunt begins. You creep along ridges, your breath ragged. The Denisovans move like shadows, spreading out, herding unseen prey toward a pass. Then you see it, a herd of wild sheep, thick coats dusted with snow, horns curling like crescents. They graze nervously, sensing something. The Denisovans gesture, silent. You crouch, clutching your borrowed spear. The chase explodes, suddenly shouts, pounding hooves, snow spraying into the air. The Denisovans surge forward, cutting off escape paths with precision. You stumble after them, lungs screaming. One man lunges, driving his spear deep. Another follows, striking clean. Within minutes, the herd scatters, leaving 2 sheep twitching in the snow. You collapse to your knees, gasping, your vision flickering. They drag the carcasses easily, their laughter rising over the wind. As you recover, you realize you've witnessed more than a hunt. You've seen mastery of a landscape that rejects you. You feel like a tourist on their mountain, a visitor who needs permission simply to survive. Historians still argue whether Denisovans and humans truly shared these high places, or if Denisovans dominated the peaks while your people stuck to valleys. The truth may lie in moments like this temporary cooperation, knowledge exchanged, before each group drifted back into its element. That night, as the carcasses roast, you taste the smoky fat and feel strength seeping back into your limbs. You glance at the Denisovans, their faces calm in the firelight, and realize their world is not just about surviving. It's about belonging. They belong here in a way you never will. Your second joke slips out between mouthfuls. You know, I'm starting to think they don't even need fire. They probably sleep outside just to prove a point. A few of your companions chuckle weakly, though most are too exhausted to laugh. Later, as you lie under firs, you listen to the wind claw at the plateau. The stars blaze above, closer here than in the valleys, sharp as knives. You think about the child's tilted head, the woman's smirk, the way they stride without fear where you stumble. You realize survival isn't equal. Some humans are built for mountains, others for plains. And when you mix those together, something new might emerge. Children who breathe easy at high altitudes, who can claim both valley and peak. You roll onto your side, watching the fire dim. Smoke drifts into the night sky, curling into the stars. The Denisovans snore steadily, their lungs untroubled by the thin air. You close your eyes, imagining what it would be like to inherit their ease, to carry mountains in your blood. The thought comforts you, even as your chest still aches with every breath. Tomorrow, you'll climb again, and again you'll falter. But tonight, wrapped in shared warmth. You know, you're not just watching survival, you're watching evolution right itself in real time. The snow melts slowly, trickling into streams that gurgle through the valleys. And with it, the fragile peace you've known begins to fracture. Spring in the Ice Age is not lush or forgiving. It is a hungry season. Herds move erratically, berries cling stubbornly to branches, and even the marrow inside bones grows scarcer. Around the fire, whispers grow sharp. Eyes linger too long on dwindling food piles, and the warmth of shared songs feels thinner than the smoke above. At first, it's subtle. Your companions grumble when Denisovan hunters bring back their kills and portion the choicest cuts for themselves. The Denisovans, in turn, notice when your people hoard the fattier bits, leaving scraps behind. You sense suspicion tightening around the fire, like sinew binding a spearhead. Mainstream fact. Competition for resources was one of the strongest forces shaping human history. Even between groups of the same species, hunger could spark conflict between different human species. Those sparks may have flared into fires that lasted generations. Archaeologists find overlapping layers of habitation in caves, one group moving in, another leaving, sometimes peacefully, sometimes not. You are living in one of those layers now, unsure which side will remain when the snow returns. One evening, as the sun bleeds red behind jagged peaks, an argument bursts like a thunderclap. One of your hunters claims the Denisovans are taking too much game, leaving little for your starving children. His voice rises, his gestures wild. The Denisovan elder replies in his rolling, guttural tones, pointing toward the hides your group hoards. Words crash against each other like antlers locked in combat. You don't need to understand the language to know. Trust is fraying. Quirky tidbit. Some skulls from Ice Age Europe show healed fractures, evidence of blows survived. Historians still argue whether these were accidents from hunts or wounds from human-on-human conflict. Looking around the tense circle tonight, you suspect the latter. Too much pride, too little food. It's a recipe older than writing. That night, the fire burns low, unshared. The two groups huddle separately, muttering in their own tongues. You lie awake, ears straining to catch every rustle in the dark, every shift of bodies. The cave no longer feels like home. It feels like a powder keg waiting for the spark. The spark comes with a hunt. A herd of reindeer passes through the valley, and both groups move at once, spears in hand. At first, you chase together, the snow flying beneath pounding feet. But when the beasts scatter, a Denisovan spear finds its mark, and one of your hunters charges in to claim it. They grapple over the kill, shouts echoing. You rush forward, trying to pull them apart, but fists fly. A spear shaft cracks, and suddenly blood stains the snow. The reindeer escape. The only thing left in the valley is anger. Historians still argue whether conflict between groups like yours was widespread or rare. Some believe humans wiped out Denisovans through relentless competition. Others think the populations were simply too small, too scattered, and nature itself was the true enemy. Tonight, staring at the crimson-stained snow, you suspect it was both nature pushing, hunger twisting, and pride snapping the thread. Your first joke of the night slips bitterly from your lips as you stagger back to camp. Well, at least the reindeer got away. They're probably laughing about it right now. Nobody laughs. Tensions simmer for days. Children cry when their parents argue. Elders scowl at one another across the fire. The songs and myths that once bound you feel hollow. Even the ochre markings on the walls seem mocking now, handprints of unity smudged by distrust. And yet, conflict doesn't always end in carnage. One evening, after another bitter day, the Denisovan woman approaches with a strip of meat. She lays it silently at your hunter's feet, the same man who fought over the reindeer. For a moment, no one moves. Then he picks it up, nodding stiffly, a fragile truce, sealed not with words but with calories. But truce is not peace. You sense rivalry hanging like fog. Every glance at a tool, every shuffle of food piles feels heavy with suspicion. You begin to realize survival isn't only about sharing warmth and stories. It's about knowing when to step away before blades flash. Historians still argue whether modern humans ultimately outcompeted Denisovans by sheer numbers, sharper strategies, or luck. Maybe it was all of those. In your bones, you sense the truth. Sometimes survival is less about winning, more about outlasting. As summer edges closer, your group debates leaving the cave. Some want to stay, claiming the mountain belongs to you now. Others urge retreat, muttering that too much blood has already seeped into the snow. You sit silently, knowing either choice will carry loss. Your second joke surfaces, dark but honest. Maybe we should just ask the mammoths to arbitrate. They seem calmer than we are. A few chuckles ripple, thin as ice. Humor becomes the last rope holding fraying bonds. The day finally comes. Packs are strapped, hides rolled, tools gathered. You cast one last look at the Denisovans, their broad chests rising steady in the mountain air. Children cling to mothers, eyes wide with uncertainty. For a heartbeat, you imagine the future children of both groups running together in the valley. Laughter blending. Then the vision fades. Your group turns away, boots crunching in gravel. Behind you, the cave smokes faintly. A beacon of what might have been. You clutch the Denisovan blade at your belt. Its edge dulled now, its meaning sharper than ever. You are walking away, not just from neighbors, but from a possibility, the chance that humans could share more than fleeting fires. That night, as you camp by a stream far from the cave, you stare into your small fire. Sparks drift into the dark, reminding you of eyes that watched you once without malice, then with suspicion, and finally with something you can't quite name. You wonder if history will remember this rivalry, or if it will vanish like footprints in snow. Your last thought before sleep is simple, weary, and heavy. Survival is not about fairness, it is about endurance. And you wonder which group, yours or theirs, will still be here when the next snows fall. The valley you march into is quiet at first, a hush broken only by the crunch of boots on frost-hardened ground. You've left the Denisovan cave behind, but traces of them cling to you, tools tucked into hides, Arca still staining your skin, chants echoing in memory. At first, the silence feels cleansing, like starting fresh, but then small things begin to emerge from the dust and rubble of campsites long abandoned, and they unsettle you more than footprints ever could. The first is a bead. You find it while scraping away earth to make a fire pit. A tiny cylinder of polished bone, drilled clean through the center. You turn it between your fingers, light catching in its hollow. It's simple, delicate, yet unnecessary. Tools cut, hides warm, meat feeds. This bead does none of those things, which means it speaks of something stranger beauty, status, or memory. You imagine a Denisovan child wearing it around his neck, laughing as it clicked against his collarbone. The realization sends a shiver down your back. Mainstream fact: archaeologists have unearthed Denisovan jewelry, including a bracelet carved from green chlorite with a hole so perfectly drilled it stunned researchers. The craftsmanship was more advanced than anything Homo sapiens were believed to be making at the same time. You glance at the bead in your hand, suddenly unsure which branch of humanity was truly primitive. Quirky tidbit: some researchers half-joked that the chlorite bracelet looked almost too modern, its hole possibly drilled with a bow drill spinning faster than fingers alone could manage. Imagine your stocky mountain neighbors inventing tools that wouldn't reappear for thousands of years. It's enough to make you laugh and cough at the same time. You string the bead on a strip of sinew, hang it from your wrist. One of your companions smirks, muttering, "Dressing up for the mammoths now?" You shrug, but secretly the bead feels heavy, like carrying a ghost. Days later, another object appears, a splintered piece of bird bone, hollowed and notched. At first, you think it's just debris, but when a child blows across it, a faint whistle sings into the air, shrill and eerie. Everyone freezes. The child giggles, tries again, and this time the sound wavers into something almost melodic. You realize it's not debris, it's a flute. Historians still argue whether Denisovans, Neanderthals, or early Homo sapiens invented the first instruments. But bone flutes dating back at least 40 years suggest someone in this era already played music. You close your eyes, listening to the whistle, and imagine a Denisovan family huddled around fire, their child puffing into this same flute, filling the cave with song. Your first joke of the night slips out easily. Well, that explains why they walked faster than us. They had theme music. Laughter breaks the tension, though it fades quickly as the whistle echoes into the hills, eerie as a bird spirit. The objects keep coming. A needle carved from reindeer bone, so fine it pierces hide without tearing. A stone blade, its edges serrated like shark's teeth. A shell smeared with dried ochre. Each discovery deepens the sense that the Denisovans weren't just hunters. They were makers, dreamers. They left behind more than footprints. They left behind glimpses of inner worlds. Historians still argue whether these objects represent isolated brilliance or widespread culture. Were Denisovans a scattered group of innovators, or was craftsmanship woven into their identity? You don't know. All you know is that your people now cradle their tools, wear their beads, their songs. Culture, it seems, does not vanish when camps are abandoned. It lingers in dust and bone, waiting to be picked up by whoever stumbles next. But not every find is comforting. One evening, while exploring a rocky overhang, you stumble on something half buried in soil. A skull fragment, thick and heavy. Its brow is pronounced, jaw square, teeth larger than yours. The group gathers silently, staring. It's not an animal. It's not one of you. It's Denisovan. The discovery chills you, not because it's strange, but because it's familiar. You recognize the curve of the forehead, the sturdy jaw. You saw those same features in the woman who smirked when you wheezed up the cliffside. Holding the fragment feels like holding a memory turned to stone. Your second joke comes out shaky, a defense against the dread. At least they didn't leave a manual saying, "How to beat us at survival." The group chuckles nervously, but no one really laughs. The skull feels too heavy for humor. You bury it again, covering it with rocks, though part of you feels guilty, like you're hiding evidence of a truth bigger than yourself. That night, as the fire snaps, you watch the bead glint on your wrist. Hear the faint whistle of the bone flute. Feel the sharp edge of their blade against your palm. You realize you're surrounded not by strangers, but by echoes. Their culture has seeped into yours like water into porous stone. Even in rivalry, even in silence, they remain. Historians still argue whether Denisovans disappeared suddenly or faded slowly, absorbed into populations like yours. Tonight, staring at their objects scattered in your camp, you sense the latter, a vanishing not of obliteration, but of blending tools, songs, genes, myths all stitched quietly into human history. You lie down under hides, sleep tugging at your eyes. But before dreams claim you, one last thought drifts across your mind. Maybe extinction isn't always a cliff. Maybe sometimes it's a handoff, a bead, a flute, a needle, passed into waiting palms. The fire still warms your nights, but the faces around it begin to change. Once, you would glance across the smoke and see wide chests, square jaws, and children with hair tangled in ochre streaks. Now, the Denisovans' places sit empty, their laughter replaced by silence so complete it rings in your ears. You don't remember the last time you shared marrow or traded tools. At first, you assumed it was temporary, that they'd returned from some hunt, laden with game. But the night stretched, and the cave mouth stayed dark. Mainstream fact: archaeological records suggest Denisovans were never numerous. They lived in scattered groups, thin on the ground. Their population too small to withstand relentless pressures from climate and competition. Where you once saw neighbours, you now see evidence of fragility, a people stretched like smoke in high winds. Your companions murmur, speculating. Some say the Denisovans moved deeper into the mountains, chasing herds. Others claim spirits carried them off. One man insists he heard them in the night, voices chanting on the wind. But when he followed, only snow spoke back. Whatever the truth, their absence grows heavier than their presence ever did. You return to the old cave, climbing its familiar slope with dread coiling in your chest. The entrance yawns open, but no smoke drifts. Inside, the fire pit lies cold, ashes scattered. You brush your fingers across the wall where handprints bloomed in ochre. The pigment flakes under your touch, faint and fragile, like dried blood. The laughter that once echoed here is gone. Only shadows remain. Quirky tidbit. In Denisova Cave, archaeologists found not just one layer of occupation, but many bands of humans moving in and out. One group replacing another. Sometimes thousands of years separated them. Standing here, you realize you are just one more layer, pressing over theirs, leaving your own charcoal in the soil while their marks crumble. Historians still argue whether modern humans actively pushed Denisovans out or whether nature alone sealed their fate. Was it violence, disease, or climate swings that silenced their fires? Or was it simply that their numbers were too small, their resilience stretched too thin? You kneel in the dust, pressing your hand against the wall, wondering if answers even matter when the silence is this complete. Your first joke tonight feels hollow but necessary. Maybe they finally got tired of us hogging the marrow. A few of your companions snort, but the humour withers quickly. Nobody really believes jokes can cover the loss. Nights stretch colder without them. The songs your group once borrowed now sound empty, hummed off key without the deep rumble of Denisovan voices. The bead on your wrist feels heavier, the flute quieter. Children mimic their chants, but it feels more like ritual than play. You realize culture lives only as long as the people who carry it. When they vanish, echoes fade. One dawn, as frost clings to grass, you spot faint tracks near the river, footprints broader than yours, shorter, pressed deep into mud. Your heart leaps. You follow them eagerly, but they fade into stone. No camp, no fire, no laughter, just prints dissolving in the earth. the hope they sparked lingers, though like a candle refusing to die. Historians still argue whether interbreeding was opportunistic or intentional. But the evidence is clear. Denisovan DNA persists in you. The woman who smirked as you gasped for breath up the cliff still lingers in your blood, in ways you can't see but feel when the air thins. Perhaps her people are gone, but their bodies remain inside yours. Extinction, you realize, is not absence, it's transformation. And yet, transformation doesn't ease the ache. You still dream of their fires, their chants, their broad shadows cast against stone. You still remember the way their children pressed ochre handprints beside yours. You wake to emptiness, heart aching with the knowledge that something precious slipped into silence. Your second joke surfaces bitterly as you roast scraps over meager flames. Maybe they just found a better cave, one with central heating and less drama. The laugh that ripples through your group is strained, but at least it's sound. Seasons turn, herds shift, life pulls you forward. But the Denisovans haunt you. Every time you see a cliff, you think of how they climbed it without gasping. Every time you smear ochre on a hide, you see their painted cheeks. Every time you watch a child stumble through the snow, you wonder if he carries their lungs, their blood, their echoes. One night, you wander back to the old cave again. Drawn by memory, you sit alone in the silence, tracing spirals carved into stone. You whisper aloud, though no one listens. Where did you go? Your voice bounces back, hollow. You close your eyes, and in the crackle of wind, you almost hear their chant, deep and steady, like mountains breathing. Historians still argue whether Denisovans truly vanished or whether they live on entirely inside us, folded into our genomes. Tonight, in the lonely hush of the cave, you prefer to believe they are not gone. They've simply been carried forward, not in body, but in song, in pigment, in bone beads, in whispers of DNA. You step outside under the stars, their cold brilliance stabbing through the dark. The valley stretches silent, but in your mind's eye, you see fires flickering still, children laughing, broad-shouldered figures striding across ridges. You know you'll never see them again. Not like before, but you also know you carry them. Every breath a reminder that survival isn't about who remains visible. It's about who lingers unseen. And with that realization, you walk back down into the valley, bead tapping against your wrist, the faint whistle of a flute echoing in your memory. The Denisovans may be gone from sight, but in your marrow, they remain. The valley grows quiet in a way that feels permanent now. No more chance encounters by rivers, no more overlapping footprints in the snow. It is just your people and the endless cold, trudging through a world that feels emptier than before. And yet, the Denisovans haven't vanished entirely. They trail you like shadows stitched into your very blood. You feel them when you climb hills without fainting, when your chest expands in thin air, when sickness passes faster than it should. They are gone from the caves. Yes, but not from you. Mainstream fact. Modern genetic studies show that Denisovan DNA lingers in many of today's humans. In Melanesia and Papua New Guinea, up to 5% of people's DNA can be traced back to Denisovans. In Tibetans and Sherpas, it's the EPAS1 gene gifted resilience against the high-altitude chill. If you live in Southeast Asia or Oceania, odds are you carry pieces of their legacy humming inside your cells. Silent reminders that love, rivalry, and survival wrote themselves into your body. Quirky tidbit. Some Denisovan genes may even shape how you sense taste and smell. Imagine that the way your tongue recoils at bitterness or delights in sweetness might come from a Denisovan ancestor who chose their berries carefully 40,000 years ago. Your dinner plate is a fossil record, you just didn't know it. Historians still argue whether it is right to call Denisovans extinct. After all, if their DNA beats inside millions of living people, are they really gone? Or are they simply diffused? Like pigment smeared so thin it colors everything without being seen directly. You crouch by your fire and wonder the same thing. Perhaps extinction is only what happens when memory fails, not when bodies blend. You carry their objects too. The bead on your wrist, the bone flute your children play, the sharper blades that reshaped your hunts. You've long since stopped thinking of them as borrowed. They are yours now, absorbed the way genes are absorbed. You realize culture and DNA are mirrors of the same truth. Humans have always been borrowers, thieves, lovers, imitators. That's how survival works. Your first joke of the night is soft, almost fond. Imagine explaining to them that 40,000 years later, we'd still be arguing about who invented beads. You grin at the absurdity. If only they could see the lectures and conferences sparked by their polished bracelet. They'd laugh until marrow dripped from their teeth. But even as you joke, a weight presses on you. You remember their faces, the smirks, the chants, the broad-shouldered ease in thin air. You know your children will not remember those details. They will remember only stories, and stories fade. One day, the Denisovans will be just myth, shadows painted larger than life. Until finally, they are whispers in genomes, too faint to name. You stare at the ochre smudges still marking your skin and wonder if those, too, will fade into dust. You don't want them to. You want every trace of the Denisovans to remain, because their presence made your world wider. Without them, you might never have realized how many ways there are to be human. As you close your eyes, you imagine the old cave once more. Fires flickering, children laughing, ochre streaks on walls, handprints pressed side by side. You let yourself believe those images live inside you now. That when you climb a mountain without gasping, it is them breathing through your chest. That when you taste marrow and smile, it is their laughter curling on your lips. Historians still argue whether humans wiped them out, or whether time simply thinned their numbers. You prefer a gentler ending? Not conquest, not erasure, just merging, like two streams folding into one river. Their waters indistinguishable, but never lost. Your second joke slips out almost as a whisper. If my doctor ever checks my DNA, I'm blaming the Denisovans for my sweet tooth. You chuckle, picturing a stocky figure smirking at you from the shadows, saying, yes, you're welcome for that. And then you grow quiet. The night hushes. Stars blaze sharp above. The fire dims, crackles into embers. You realize this is the true ending, not disappearance, not silence, but absorption. The Denisovans are not gone. They are you. And now, as the last embers soften into ash, your story drifts too. The sharp edges of rivalry and survival blur into something calmer, slower. You let your breathing ease, long and steady, the way those mountain-bred chests once pulled air without effort. Imagine lying back against cool stone. Fires glow dimming on your skin, while the hush of snow outside muffles every sound. Your thoughts wander like smoke, curling in soft, endless patterns. The Denisovans are no longer figures at the cave's edge, no longer rivals by the river. They are threads woven into your marrow, songs humming in the dark of your blood, faint but eternal. Each breath you take is shared with them. Each heartbeat echoes theirs. They do not vanish. They linger in you, in me, in every step our kind has taken since those first awkward meetings by the fire. The cave grows darker. The ochre handprints fade to shadows. Yet in that fading is comfort, because shadows mean the light was once there, and perhaps still is. You can carry it forward. You already do. So, as your eyes grow heavy and your body sinks deeper into warmth, remember this? Extinction is never truly the end. It is just a transformation, a folding into something new. The Denisovans rest in your chest, in your genes, in your dreams. And tonight, as you drift, they rest at your side too, steady as the mountains they once called home. Good night, traveler. Sleep easy.